What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Royale YouTube channel. We're back with another Dynasty price check this week. We did one this week, talked about Tony Pollard possibly being a league winner for our, contenders out there. Ship that late first and hope for the best. And it looks like, based on the usage that we saw in the Thanksgiving game, we could be seeing Tony Pollard be that guy. So we like to do this and break down one Dynasty asset. And I got to talk about CJ Stroud before this week is done. A quarterback out of Houston has become almost a superstar, right? Rookie quarterback, what he's been able to do the last 3 weeks. He's really put himself on the map of where his dynasty value should be, but he is creeping up there in the top tier categories. So we're going to be looking at trades, value, outlook, and whether or not you should be buying, selling, holding. What should you be doing in dynasty? We're going to be covering it all here in this episode. So hit that like button, and I'll catch you guys on the other side. All right, let's get into CJ Stroud and let's just talk about, what he's been able to do and just his value overall as a quarterback this year. So for fantasy weeks 1 through 11, so, as of right now, he is quarterback 10, 19.6 fantasy points per game. He's right behind Patrick Mahomes in terms of this year, in terms of where they're looking at for points per game, and also just overall standings, which is crazy to think about with Pat Mahomes being consensus quarterback 1. And that's where we're talking about with Stroud and his value, his ceiling, all of those things that we hear. Now, the last 3 weeks are the weeks why, people are really buying into him. He had a lackluster Carolina game 4 weeks ago. And in weeks 9 through 11, he is quarterback 2, 26.7 fantasy points per game. And something's really clicking, right? We've seen him have probably career high almost in attempts, but we have seen a ton, 42, 39, and 37 the last 3 games. And in that time frame, he's thrown 4 touchdowns. But also, when you're just looking at what he's been able to do, he's also rushed for 3 touchdowns. So now we're starting to see that rushing upside that we didn't see in college. As someone who covers college football as well as the NFL, when I do content, CJ wasn't allowed to do a lot of that running at Ohio State. For whatever reason, Ryan Day did not like it. So now we're seeing a rushing upside that we didn't think that he had. Right. And some of us thought that, hey, he had athleticism, but maybe that it wouldn't translate. Now we're talking about maybe a Konami type code quarterback that's going to have even more of a ceiling, right? We thought maybe just a passing ceiling. Now he's going to have that rushing ceiling. That's what's probably pretty exciting about, CJ Stroud moving forward. Now, when you're looking at him overall, let's just talk about real quick what we like and moving forward with his dynasty outlook, right? Before we get into like the values and all of that, just overall with him, like offensive scheme, he found himself in a perfect scheme. Solik's offense out there in Houston, it looks extremely, extremely good. The pieces around him, they've been able to fit these pieces. And remember, this is from the Shanahan system. So when you have a talent like Stroud, imagine what Shanahan would do with a talent like Stroud instead of Brock Purdy, right? Now we're seeing that really evolve. And that's what's great about it. Running back room, they have the guys that they like. I know Devin Singletary is a massive piece for them. Dameon Pierce has been underperforming this year, but they do like Singletary there. From a wide receiver perspective, Nico Collins has kind of stepped up, but the real guy in this one is Tank Dell. Tank Dell at Houston had almost a 40% dominator rating. He really creates separation. He does a lot of good things for this offense. So you have to like that about the offensive weapons. And I think the other part about the scheme too, paired with the weapons, is that we thought maybe this would be a heavy run team, kind of, control the game and not let Stroud kind of lose it. They came out firing from the start. So that tells me they believe in his talent and they believe in him as a player. And now it's even getting more. They trust him so much. You see him making changes at the line. Like, this coaching staff believes in Stroud, and that is going to help his dynasty value because he's going to get a ton of attempts. He's going to get volume all over the field. And then from a weapon standpoint, Dalton Schultz has looked very good. Again, these contracts, though, like Singletary, Schultz, all 1-year deals. When you're looking at what they're going to be doing, will they bring them back? How's that going to look? I think also they could maybe upgrade their wide receiver position either through the draft or, in free agency. I know T. Higgins, some of these guys are all out there. Ayuk, possibly in a couple years. Like, there's ways that they can maybe go out here and get a wide receiver. We've seen a lot of wide receivers move too in trades, so that could also be a possibility. I do know Houston needs to fix their interior defensive line, and their offensive line could use a little bit of a bolster, but they could just get even better weapons around him. And the CJ hasn't even hit his ceiling yet, like in terms of just as a prospect, right? Not as a fantasy asset, but as a prospect. So a lot of the rocket ships are pointing up, right? There's not a lot of negatives or drawbacks. The only thing I would say that could hurt him is if, hey, they maybe don't go out there and get better weapons. That offensive line gets they don't do better there. And then maybe their offensive coordinator leaves for a head coaching job, right? Maybe Bobby Slowick goes somewhere after 1 year, which I have a hard time seeing. But the lack of offensive coordinators out there in terms of being viable head coach candidates could hurt the Texans, because they might look at what he's done this year and say, yeah, let's bring him over. We'll just draft a quarterback and we'll let him loose. So that's part of the issue I see. But overall, you have to love what CJ Stroud has built around him. Now, as far as his outlook right now in terms of his value from a dynasty perspective, you'll see it here. It's pretty close to as high as it's been. He had a little bit of a bump down, but obviously off a 40-point, fantasy game, it's going to be higher. But this is the highest it has been in terms of like consistently throughout his career when we're talking about where his values are. So, we're all across the board in terms of values. On Keep Trade Cut, he's bouncing between 4 and 3 right now. So, he's at QB3 as we record it, but he was at 4 like an hour ago. So that's definitely moving up and down. So it really goes Mahomes, Hurts, Stroud, and Allen right now. So the question I have is like, would you be able to draft CJ Stroud to start up over Josh Allen? I think that's incredibly tough to do. But I actually just put Stroud at my QB4. So I do have him as QB4, and I know that's aggressive, and I'm probably going to get the comments. And I'd love that. Let me know what you guys think. Should he be there or should he not? Like, where do you put him? Should you be as reactionary as that in Dynasty, where I didn't move Stroud above my QB10, I think it was, all the way until now. So I waited till November, but I think I've seen the sample size. I see all the positive things. Now, when we're talking about super flex values right now, CJ Stroud for straight up for Jamar Chase, right? Now we're talking about if you're moving CJ Stroud or getting CJ Stroud, you're either giving up an elite asset or getting one, right? CJ Stroud for straight up for Joe Burrow. And I don't know, man, Joe Burrow has slipped down in terms of value. I did a mock in our Patreon that we have, a Dynasty mock, and Stroud went ahead of Burrow. Burrow didn't go to, I think, QB7, QB6. And so you're seeing a really big flip there. Now, let's say you're not a contender and you're like, hey, I want to go get Burrow. I think he's a better asset. Maybe you can get Burrow plus something like you'll see down there on the bottom right. I don't know. It's kind of interesting how that works. Then you have CJ Stroud a second for Josh Allen. So you really could pair a second and CJ to go get Allen. I have a hard time accepting that, though. Like I struggle with that one because I think I'd rather have CJ Stroud in the second, because I could probably get a wide receiver better than Terry McLaurin in the second in this year's class. And then I get CJ, who's probably already a top 5 asset. Now, CJ Stroud for Justin Fields in the second. There's no way I'm doing that deal. Whoever got Fields there, you got hammed. CJ Stroud at first for Josh Allen and Breece Hall, I thought was the most interesting trade here. I still would think I'd take Stroud in the first, because I do think I can get an asset in that first round, depending on the position. If it's a wide receiver, maybe the equal to Breece Hall, right? I still like Josh Allen and Breece Hall. Like, if you want to go that side, I get it. But I think this is a contender kind of / rebuilding team, and I think this is a great deal here. CJ Stroud, Tank Dell for Patrick Mahomes and Tucker Kraft. So little paired up with Tank, and then you get Patrick Mahomes. And then CJ Stroud, Adam Thielen in a second for Joe Burrow in a first. And again, there's that Joe Burrow. A lot of Joe Burrow deals for Stroud here. And I think it has to do with contender, non-contender areas in there. Now, when you're looking over at this one quarterback value, the one quarterback is always tough. I always like to include it, though, because I think, one quarterback leagues get kind of crapped on out there. But CJ Stroud for a first, CJ Stroud and Barkley for Joe Burrow, Kenneth Walker, Christian Kirk. I think that's pretty a wash in terms of, like, unless I was contending on the Stroud side, because I do think Burrow and Walker are pretty much the same. And then you get a Kirk asset. So I do think that's good there. I don't know why you want Walker and Kirk, though, on Burrow's side. I guess if you think you can compete next year and you have a quarterback that can fill in. CJ Stroud in the third for Trevor Lawrence in the second. So, Lawrence and Stroud's values all over the place. Lawrence right now is QB10 on Keep Trade Cut, whereas Stroud's QB3, 4, right? So there is that. CJ Stroud and CeeDee Lamb for Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. I thought that was a fascinating deal there. And you're just betting on the receiver that you like the best. I think rest of the season, though, CeeDee Lamb's got to be in that category. CJ Stroud for Romeo Dubs, and a 24 first. Give me CJ and Kyler Murray in a first. Again, that's just the preference trade. You want the added first in one quarterback, and you like Murray's upside of the rushing. I don't think I can fault that one. CJ Stroud for Kyle Pitts and Kyler Murray, and then CJ Stroud for TJ Hawkinson. So those are some of the deals and some of the players going around there. That Hawkinson deal was a tight end premium type deal. So this is a fascinating discussion because I do think that CJ has outperformed all expectations. Maybe not for some, because some had him as their QB1, and I know that, but he has shot up the board now. Now, do you feel like he should be a top 5 dynasty asset? Are you concerned about that? Because we've seen guys pop up before and then they drop back down. Or are you comfortable with that offense? Let me know in the comments. What are we thinking there? As far as me, my position. I have him as QB4 in Dynasty. Am I crazy? I don't know. But I think that just based on startups and what his value is and what he's shown as a passer, whereas like Justin Fields was going in like that QB7 to 10 range last year in startups, but that was really from a rushing standpoint. We were hoping he was going to get better at his passing. Stroud's already done that. Now we're going to see that rushing ability too. Like, I think it fits Stroud perfectly. I think he's a top 5 guy in Dynasty, and I'm comfortable saying that out loud. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. Appreciate it. I'll check you next time.